I'm currently listening to the most gorgeous summer rainstorm out my window. I've had no sleep, I'm desperate to go to bed, but I also want to do another episode of the Q&A, so here we are. If you guys are out of the loop, I managed to play a little bit of the upcoming demos, the new elite specializations, the stuff that's arriving with Guild Wars 2 Path of Fire, and I'm trying to give everyone as much information as I possibly can. So, a small update on the previous episodes. Someone asked me why there was a number 3 on the throw axe ability for the warrior on my footage. You hopefully can see it in the background here. And I said, oh no, that's just my keybinds, it was an issue, blah blah blah, there's nothing that's changed. I was wrong. It is a new change. That is a part of the course update that's going on to the regular classes. If you guys don't know, we're not just getting a bunch of new elite specializations, but they're putting a big balance patch out, that affects the core game too. Stuff like giving barrier to elementalists in Earth Attunement and so on. That throw axe is using the ammunition mechanic. I was completely wrong on that question, and that's going to happen, you know, when we're in turbulent times like this. Yes, you get to throw 3 axes. It's got 3 ammo, I think it is. And it will recharge slowly in the background as you go. The ammo mechanic is awesome, and that's a perfect skill to put it on. So yes, I was wrong about that. Let's get on to some new questions. If at any point you guys want to comment on something of your own, just drop it down below, and hopefully I'll pick you out. So Casey Garland says, in Guild Wars Nightfall, we killed Abaddon, and Cormier replaced him as a god. Something about the power that needs to be taken up. With Balthazar being this sort of rogue god, would you say we will end up killing him like we do Abaddon? And if so, do you think that someone will need to take up the mantle of the god of war? If so, who? Ritlock, maybe? Yeah, I've heard this theory a lot since the POF stuff has come out. People really seem to like the idea too. I think it's kind of scary territory because the whole Cormier thing is so infamous. But people really like Ritlock, and I think Ritlock's paved his way quite well. That would be very cool. In a previous episode of this Q&A, I mentioned that I think an interesting climax would be another fight waged between the gods at the ruins of Mora, just like that Abaddon fight. And yeah, maybe if it ends this time and Ritlock becomes the god, that could be very curious. Depending on the actual specifics of what happened to him in the Mist and how big of a role he has to play in this expansion, I think we'll sincerely shift how they end it. And maybe they could make him the god of war by the end. That would be quite a crazy shift, and would be amazing to see people's reaction. I don't even know what I think about that right now, except that it would be a bold move. I'll give you that, a very bold move indeed. Michael Paulson asks, what will happen when every class can use every weapon with the elite specializations? I am only answering this because a lot of people thumbed up, so clearly you guys are interested. But they will start to explore new weapons, surely. There's actually 2 routes. One, the devs can start exploring new weapons, and I think that they should start doing that even sooner than when all the rosters are filled up. Elite specializations don't exist as a game to give every class every weapon. That's such an arbitrary reason for them to exist. That's not like some end goal we're working towards. I think that I really hope that the Gen 3 ones start adding new weapons, or at least bring the underwater weapons above ground and start exploring stuff like that. I was talking to the developers about the way that barrier works, and I asked why there's not a new barrier stat, and instead why does it key into healing power and vitality. And I was told that it's because if they do big things like that, they kind of have to go through all the old loot tables in the game and adjust things, and it's kind of just a big work thing. And I think that could be why, more than anything else, we haven't seen new weapons come into the game. But I would really like that. I want the great axes, and I want the whips, and I want the spears, and so on. You know, there is another interesting thing from this generation of elite specializations, and that's that not only did the devs not add any new weapons, not only did they not add any underwater weapons as above land equivalents, they didn't even play around with what is offhand and what is main hand. I would have thought at least that last one might happen. So my example here would be in Ascalon Catacombs, you get an elementalist that's dual wielding scepters. That's an NPC. That is an idea of taking what is currently only a main hand weapon and applying it to the offhand as well. Or other examples might be taking offhand only things and making them main hand. Imagine a main hand wielding, torch wielding ranger, or a main hand wielding shield warrior, so you can go shield shield. They didn't even do that. They didn't even play with that part of the formula. So one of those 3 things, surely, in Gen 3, we'll see them. There's so much possibility, and that's all really creative, fun stuff, and easy ways to make people love an elite specialization. You can invent a terrible elite specialization with awful design, but if it's wielding a great axe, people are going to fall in love, as arbitrary as that is. Juan Simino says, hey WP, do you expect most mount skins to be locked behind the gem store just like glider skins are? Well, in the world that they do mount skins, yeah, I think they'll be on the gem store. We might get 1, maybe 2 in-game, and they would be amazing rewards to have in-game, don't get me wrong, but I think that they'll be on the gem store, and I think they'll, even more so in Path of Fire, more likely to be on the gem store, because they set up a precedent in Heart of Thorns that they were only ever going to do gliders, basically, in the gem store, and so now people are like, oh, well, that's just the way they work, and people aren't questioning the decision anymore, and I think that that's even more reason why we would see it. I will point out, though, many of us think, oh yeah, there's gonna be skins for mounts and they'll be in gem store and blah blah blah, but it is interesting that with Heart of Thorns we already had a glider skin on the table with the pre-purchase. It was like one of the, you know, the ultimate edition extras that you'd get, right? While with Path of Fire we haven't already seen a you know, an exclusive mount skin for higher tier people, so maybe they really are unsure on whether they're gonna do mount skins or not, which is the official line. But I mean, surely they've had some meeting about this. It's too crazy of a cash cow, no? Purge says, hey WP, I can't wait to run around in the core world and Heart of Thorns maps with my Raptor, but I've started thinking. Heart of Thorns had gliding, Path of Fire has mounts, so what will the next mobility item be in the next expansion? Idea off the top of my head, maybe we could all run around like the Flash, lol. You know, it's funny that people are already starting to regiment things this way and think about it. I think that the next expansion can be a mix, right? There's actually, just because gliding was the best of the Heart of Thorns masteries, I don't think that that completely invalidates the other ones. Like, some of them were messy, definitely, but I think that there is good design in stuff like the bouncing mushrooms and the adrenal mushrooms, and even episode 6, I think, has a really interesting mastery. It just needs the content to really be built around it for it to truly shine. There's a lot the mastery system can do. For all of its flaws, there's a lot it can do, and I kind of really don't like the idea that it's gonna be almost usurped by this idea of mounts. I don't like the idea that it's just, okay, next expansion we'll get a couple more mounts, except there'll be water themed mounts, and then we'll get a couple more and there'll be this themed and this themed and this themed. I think that would sort of suck. Expansion 3 could look at the best of both. It could look at everything that was cool about Heart of Thorns masteries, sub gliding, and it can look at including maybe some mount-based stuff and combine it together. The comment chain on your question here starts talking about underwater stuff, and yeah, if we ever get an underwater expansion, there's all kinds of cool masteries to do with that, to do with surviving in very dark areas, in very high-pressure areas, being able to move through slipstreams and water currents and access labs and things on the bottom of the ocean. There's so much cool stuff that the mastery system could do. It just needs a couple of tweaks, really. I don't think it should be the mastery, open brackets, mounts, close brackets system. I think it should be the mastery system, and mounts are just a part, not the be-all and end-all. Kind of a techie question here. Remco Labrugin says, will we be able to try out the new elite specializations in the upcoming beta version? Now, a lot of you guys listening might already know the answer to this, but I haven't properly clarified it because I didn't know whether I was under NDA to talk about it or not, but it has been officially revealed. So there is a demo where you get to play the PvE stuff, and that first demo is going to be not the current weekend you're watching this video, but the one after, all right? That's going to be the first demo, and then there's going to be a second demo, and in the second one, you will get access to the elite specializations for, at the very least, PvP, and I think they're hoping for World versus World as well, but I don't know whether that's actually going to happen, or that's definitely no official line from me there. But that's where you're going to be able to play the elite specializations. At no point will you be the elite specializations in the desert in the demo. You have to wait for the full release to get it all at once together. But yeah, those are the two sort of preview events that are going to be going on. I mean, it's amazing, guys. We've got such a small wait for the expansion, and in the middle of it, we've got 2 demo weekends to experience as well. Bonkers, totally crazy. But that's the way that that's going to be working, and yes, I can officially say that. More technical mount questions. Brutaline says, can you start gliding after jumping with the bunny mount? That could break quite a few things in core / Heart of Thorns maps. So I don't actually know this, but really what your question is actually asking is, can you dismount in mid-air? Because then you can just trigger the ability and dismount in mid-air and then start gliding. Or even, can you mount in mid-air? Now, while I'm pretty sure you won't be able to mount in mid-air, and I haven't verified this myself, looking at the development of the new Fractal And that patch note, remember, people can now turn in midair, and people can now pick up engineer kits and drop engineer kits in midair. And now that there's that new gravity and low grav stuff and the tentacle things and the fractal, because they changed all of that midair physics stuff, I actually think now that could have been because of mounts, and I think that may have been to facilitate exactly what you're asking for. I think it is so that you can jump up quite high on the bunny and then maybe get off of it and start gliding around. I wouldn't be surprised. Or equally on the raptor, maybe you can leap forward and then you can go into a glide. I'd never tried those things out specifically, but I think that all makes sense. Even more on mounts, Dan Hoog says, the mounts' skills use endurance. Will daredevils therefore be able to do more jumps because of their increased endurance? Theoretically, yes. So for people that don't know, when you're on a mount, you still get your dodge bar there. And that mechanic is called endurance. Except your mounts cannot actually dodge. But when you press jump, they do their special like jump ability. So the raptor, the jump is moving forward very fast. The second mounts, the jump skill, you can hold down and you can jump very high. The third one, the skimmer, I'm not quite sure how that works. The fourth one presumably triggers your teleport. These all cost endurance. It's the endurance of your mount, I guess, but it's combined with yours at the same time. So yeah, if you're a daredevil, the Heart of Thorns elite specialization, you are kind of the best mount rider in all of Guild Wars 2 because you can tell your mount to trigger that ability more frequently than anyone else. I wish I had played Daredevil on the preview and got that information for you guys. Maybe that's something you all want to do next weekend. But yeah, it feels like Daredevil should be stronger than mount, right? I'll add as well, there's a lot of really funny interactions and things to think about like this. You know, we talked about the full damage thing and mounts can trigger your full damage traits. Another thing I was very interested in recently was the idea of environmental weapons. Now, we had this discussion when Heart of Thorns was coming out. Can you hold an environmental weapon while gliding? And the answer to that ultimately was yes, and that was really cool. If you think about Verdant Brink, you were first getting to grips with gliding, and the main mechanic on the map, or one of the big mechanics, was running pack supply to these various camps, and so you could pick them up, you could hold them in your hand, and then glide off over a big cliff, and you would still have it when you landed on your glider. The question should go again then for mounts. Can I still do that on mounts? You know, I was playing a warrior, and what if I'd been running a banner on that warrior? Can I pick up a banner and then climb on my mount with, you know, my hand on the one hand on the reins and the other charging around with a banner? And then as I move around holding my banner, do I then push the aura out to 10 people as I charge among them on my raptor? That stuff sounds so cool, right? And I just hadn't really thought of it and thought of testing it. There's so many little interactions. Another big one, I'll head this question off early as well. I know a lot of people have been asking it. We haven't got to anyone specifically yet. People are wondering about interacting with things though. What if you go up to a cactus in the desert while you're on your raptor and you want to gather it? Can you press F and then your raptor will bow down so that you can cleave it off the side? The answer to that, unfortunately, is no. They did not build all those animations. What happens is you press F and that automatically dismounts you and rolls you into the gather animation. And then once the gather animation ends, you stand back up and it's your job as a player to remount. Which all feels incredibly fluid, by the way. It feels just as fluid as, say, popping Lich Form or doing something as simple as a weapon swap. It really does feel that fluid. And I think the default bind is X, which is right next to W, A, and D, and that's going to mess with some people. And you can rebind it, obviously, but for a lot of us, that might have been a free key anyway, and it does all feel very, very smooth, but they didn't build all those animations. That's kind of unfortunate. I also don't like that you can't wave from the back of your mount. I think the mounts might have a /sit, because I have, looking at my own footage, noticed at the start of the mount race, people are using /sit at the beginning of the race area. Or maybe that's just one of the idle animations that plays when you know, take your hands off the keyboard and mouse for long enough, and they'll start messing about. But yeah, so that's even more interesting little mechanical things to think about when it comes to mounts. A little bit of even more excitement for you guys. With gliding, they let you have environmental weapons, and then consistently throughout the expansion itself, with, say, that mission where you've got the special gliding skills with the glint supercharged stuff, and then all the way through the season following it, Season 3 had all kinds of different glider things, the Bloodstone Fen glider abilities, the Episode 6 ones. So if they did all that with the gliding stuff, then surely they could do that with mounts as well. Maybe we can have special moments where we do get to shoot people with a rifle off of the back of the Raptor because they built content to allow you to do that. I don't think there's anything that the engine says meaning that that's impossible, so it's all pretty exciting. Honey Bear has a question that will lead me into something vaguely interesting. Hey WP, since Alona is a thing in the new expansion pack now, do you think we will also get to Cantha in the future? Alright, well, story-wise, there's definitely reason we can go to Cantha, and this general theme or vibe that we're slowly traveling south. You know, we'll get this expansion and go quite far south, and then Season 4 we'll go quite south, and then maybe at the end of Season 4 we're on the edge of Istan, and then we go even further south and we get all the way back down to Kaineng or something. That's all perfectly plausible and fine. The weird conspiracy theory meddling, why the Great Collapse exists, blah 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 stuff, I don't know, really. I guess we'll have to wait for more developer comments on that. I'd love to go back to Cantha. I think there's lots of great reason for it. However, I will latch onto your comment here because there's another little thing that I can now talk about. A lot of people have been asking me where that big lore series I did years ago was, and why I haven't continued it. I explained to everyone that when we got to Cantha, when we actually got an expansion about Cantha, then I would love to go back to that series and produce it for people when the time is right. And then ArenaNet threw a complete curveball and gave us friggin' Alona instead. So the ordering would be all off and weird, and I had to make the decision to want to jump forward in time. And so maybe you guys can understand a little bit why that's all been a bit tricky there. But very, very funny, and I can't help but sort of look back and smirk at the way that things have gone in the end. Especially considering I unknowingly, about 6 months ago, happened to go back to Nightfall, which happens to be the same region that the new expansion is actually taking place in. If I just delayed that 6 months, I could be doing that for you guys right now, but it would feel a bit weird to go back again. Adrian Tanith has an interesting question. Do you think there's a chance ArenaNet could bring us the branded beta event with this expansion? That's a great question. So people might not know, but one of the in the early betas for the core game, at the end of the beta, they did like a special event to send it all out. And they had a couple of versions. One was in Metrica Province, but the first one was in Plains of Ashford. And basically the branded attacked the map, and it was kind of an open world PvP thing, and it was last man standing. Really cool, lots of fun. And you know, I had a conversation with someone years ago who was going to try and set up his own private server of Guild Wars 2, and he was excited to do it because he knew that if he did that, he would have the power to turn that event back on and so on. I don't know whether ArenaNet will do that exact event again, but they might draw inspiration from it. It would be a perfect time to go back to something like that. And if you look at Heart of Thorns, they added kind of those sort of PvP, PvE mix situations a lot. Look at the ways that we compete with one another just before the Auric Basin meta. Look at that PvP thing where if you're a Sylvari character and you're in the main story, they did do a little bit of that. So why not more of it in the expansion? We've seen that they've embraced a bit more competitive stuff among players in PvE, even with like the mount races in there. We know that adventures are back in the expansion, by the way. Lots of people have been asking me, are there adventures? Yes, there are adventures. I promise there are adventures. They did not drop that system. I'm very happy to hear that. And you know, maybe an adventure is a good place to be able to do something like this too. Maybe it's a bit too competitive for that. But yeah, great question. Lovely idea. Alan Huang has got an excellent point to make. He says, do you think that there will be anything related to the Order of Whispers in the new expansion or Season 4? If I remember the story of the Order, they originated in Alona, and they've also been vindicated in their belief that we can't kill the dragons and have to focus on putting them to sleep. I am absolutely on board with the Order of Whispers being a part of this story. In fact, I feel they need to be a part of this story. You'll notice that for the past, 2 years real world time of Guild Wars 2 stories, the Order of Whispers haven't really been around much, and I've liked that because the Order of Whispers are supposed to be secretive and not always in the face and obvious what they're doing on Tyria. That's fine, but I also wonder whether the devs have deliberately eased off of them so that they can push them hard when the story gets to this point, because they deserve to be, they have to be a big part of this story here, and I'd really like to see them come forward. I'd like to see a proper dive into that one specific order instead of always pushing it onto the Pact instead, and seeing how Logan perhaps deals with them as we go into that area of the world is great. We've seen the other faction of the past, the Sunspears. We've seen how the Sunspears became the Spellbreakers, and we know that there's going to be little bits of information like that around, but definitely the Order of Whispers need some kind of a big role. The Order of Whispers only originally existed to watch over Palawa Joko's tomb, where he had been entombed as a lich and he couldn't be destroyed. And Palawa Joko is one of the primary antagonists of this expansion. How the Order of Whispers can't be a part of that would boggle my mind. We have to see them do stuff. We might even get an answer to that mystery about one of the high-ranking members of the Order of Whispers. I think it's Dern Velezquez or whatever his name is. We don't quite know where he came from. I'd love to return to that stuff. It'd be great, right? I think what people need to do for the best story in this expansion is play a human that was blessed by Balthazar, lost their sister, who was of Elonan descent, and in the fight against Zaitan joined the Aura of Whispers. I think if you do all of that, you're set up for, you know, the best route through the next territory we're heading into. I don't know, maybe there's a cool Char storyline in there as well. It depends how much influence Kraukatorik's got on this next stuff coming up. And I'm a bit exhausted, guys, so I think I will leave this one here. Please do feel free to leave lots more questions down below. One other little clarification from yesterday as well. We were talking about waypoints on the new map, and people were talking about there being only 3 on the map, and I said, well, if you saw 3 in the demo area, that was only a small slice. It's 3 on the map. We know this because if you look at the top left, the legend that tells you how many POIs there are, vistas, and so on, that says 3. And so, yes, it is 3 on the first map, and that is obviously because mounts are going to be a thing. Exploration should be very interesting to check out for. Anyway, guys, I'll leave it there. Thanks very much for watching. I haven't mentioned my buy link for like 4 or 5 videos now, so if you guys have been enjoying, if you're going to get people in the game, remember that there's something in the description that would help me out a bit. And otherwise, have a good one all. I'll see you next time.